We're not crazy, the system is. Tune in to Madness Radio, voices and visions from outside mental health. Wednesdays 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Pacifica affiliate WXOJLP-FM 103.3 Valley Free Radio. Produced by Freedom Center and the Icarus Project, streaming live, podcasting, and archived at madnessradio.net. Welcome to Madness Radio. This is your host, Will Hall. And today I'm really excited. We have a survivor, organizer, activist, Moosa Salie, who is calling us from Capetown, South Africa. He is the co-chair of the World Network of Users and Survivors of Psychiatry, and he was involved in the first consumer organizer advocacy group that was formed in South Africa. He's going to be telling us about that. So he's a father of four and an ex-teacher. So welcome to Madness Radio, Moosa Salie.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks a lot for joining us. And you're calling us from Capetown.
Yes. We at the moment experiencing a heat wave, so the weather's stunning.
Oh, a heat wave! Wow. Well, tell us about. I know that you're somewhat of an international organizer with the survivor movement, and you're involved with stuff with the United Nations and things going on in other parts of Africa and around the world. Tell us just about how you first got connected with the mental health system. What's your own sort of experience of going through madness or extreme states, and then how did you kind of make your way out of that into becoming an activist?
Well, my story starts back in the late 90s, and I was a teacher at the time. I was experiencing lots of personal stress at work, and I think I found life hard to cope with, and that's when I ended up visiting a psychiatrist who started me on medication, and I was actually hoping that it would help me. And within a few months actually of starting, I actually experienced a breakdown, which was kind of strange to me because they were supposed to save me from having a breakdown, if you understand what I'm saying.
What medication were you prescribed?
Well, initially I was put on Lamictal, which we call Lamictal here, and for anxiety, that's an antidepressant, and then for anxiety, I was prescribed low doses of Fluanxol, which has anxiolytic properties, they say, but in fact it is a neuroleptic.
So it's like an antipsychotic major tranquilizer,
yes.
Like Haldol
yes,
or
but
Stelazine.
Low doses at the time, they said it has. But you know, at the time I was very trusting, so I actually believed everything that I was told.
Now, is this pretty common? Because I mean, this is a common story in the United States that someone goes to a psychiatrist for help. They don't know where to go. They go to a psychiatrist. They get on medication. Is that pretty much the same situation there in South Africa?
Very much so, especially in South Africa with people in the urban settings. You know, it's fairly a good infrastructure, and there is enough strength around and enough mental health services. So people end up this way. Unfortunately, there is also another system which we call the government system. My system being the private system, which I belong to. The government system, they usually are not that well provided for, and they usually don't have the so-called better drugs.
Huh. So getting back to your story there. So you were put on Lamictal and another drug, an antipsychotic, and then you really think that contributed to a breakdown?
Well, I wouldn't say it contributed to my breakdown, but in a sense, I couldn't tell the difference. My life continued as stressful as it used to be before, and even the so-called therapy with the psychiatrist, I didn't actually notice any meaningful help that he was giving me, except that I was talking and he wasn't saying much. And at the end of the day, or at the end of each session, he would say, well, let's tweak your dose a bit, and if you feel better, let me know. If not, let's try something else. That's generally the approach that I was facing. And because I'm one of the lucky ones who has medical insurance, we call it medical aid, um, I could see the psychiatrist quite often at the time, whereas most of the people in the state system, if they're lucky, they get to see a psychiatrist for 5 minutes once every 6 months.
So then what happened? Did you end up in the hospital after that, or?
Well, I never actually ended up in the hospital. At some point, I did attend a private clinic, which was very helpful, I must admit, because part of the program there was group sessions with occupational therapists, and that I found very useful. And also, I had some exposure to yoga groups and stuff, which I also found very helpful. But other than that, psychotherapy with a psychiatrist never seemed useful, and the drugs also I could never tell the difference in terms of an improvement. But after a while, I started experiencing bad side effects, and maybe I can talk about that.
What kinds of side effects did you have?
Well, a couple of years later, I was seeing a new psychiatrist, and she started me on Zyprexa, the big boogeyman one that everybody's talking about. Unfortunately, not many people are aware of that yet. Although I've heard some stuff about Zyprexa, but not that publicized yet, as it is over there by you. Maybe it was just good instincts, and also in that period I met David Oakes and the Mind Freedom people. I got exposure to the literature, and that sort of made up my mind for me, and I got off Zyprexa real quick because I was luckily warned at the time, but a couple of years down the line, even now, I'm experiencing a lot of quite dramatic personal experiences with I think damage that was actually done by my having used Zyprexa for a few months. One of it is the sensation of hunger that I experience, and which also impacts on my mood state because it seems as if my body is unable to regulate its blood sugar level, and I think when my sugar level drops, it makes me get very ballistic, if I can call it that.
Right, because we know that Zyprexa has been linked to metabolic problems and diabetes. So
Yes.
it sounds like you're having these side effects that are kind of related to the diabetes and metabolic problems that could have developed if you were on the drugs longer.
Yes, of course. At one point, a GP told me that I might possibly be transient, in a sense, developing towards diabetes. Another drug that I have been on and which I'm still actually struggling to wean myself from is Effexor, and this drug is like really the big evil one in the antidepressants, and I noticed you guys nobody has really picked up on it. But one I did an interesting experiment. I typed into Google Zyprexa withdrawal side effects, and I came upon a discussion forum on one of the bigger websites, medical related, and there was this massive forum of people complaining about the difficulties withdrawing from Effexor, which is venlafaxine, the generic. Basically, people are talking about experiencing brain shocks, which was something I found so hard to describe or to explain to people because it's like very disorientating. You feel these jolts in your head, and actually I tried to reason it out like this: that the drug initially comes across as being benign and it's like supposedly helpful, but as soon as you try and betray the drug and you turn your back on it, it then reminds you that you need to take it. And strangely enough, as soon as you take your next dosage, you feel you feel that those terrible side effects are gone. So it's been almost 2 years that I've been slowly weaning myself of Effexor, which would be the last one, and then I'm free.
Yeah, that's definitely there has been some talk. I know that the Freedom Center support group and on the Icarus project forums just about Effexor and the kind of like the electrical jolts that people experience. And in fact, some of us even call it side effectsor. It's kind of like a joke, side effectsor.
That's a distinct withdrawal effect. It's not a side effect. Side effects, you usually feel nothing much, except maybe the dry mouth and stuff like that. But the thing that I failed to mention was that the day when I looked at that forum, there was 25 pages of comments from people all over the world. And within 2 days, I noticed about 5 pages added. And each page had about 10 people telling their own personal story. So it's a really quiet disaster happening, and not many people are aware of it. I mean, if there are in fact hundreds of thousands of people, I suppose, all over the world, if not millions, having this horrible experience with Effexor. And yet I was told at the time, you're lucky because this is what only private patients can get. The people in the state system are still getting your old tricyclic antidepressants because it's so expensive.
Right, because Effexor is considered one of the newer and better drugs, and that's one of the ironies, I think, of the mental health system, is that sometimes having more money available and having insurance actually means that you get more treatment, which can actually end up being more harmful with some of these drugs. Moosa, let me ask you, in terms of like the stress and difficulties that you were going through that led you to get on to these medications, how did you learn to kind of overcome them on your own, and what was it that helped you with your own wellness? I know you mentioned the occupational therapy group that you went in as an outpatient, and you mentioned yoga, but what are some of the things that have been helpful to you to deal with that without psychiatry?
I am still basically struggling in many ways or with many things, but you know what? I have kind of realigned my understanding, and that has been a big boost for me, because initially you were thinking, one was thinking that, wow, this is a chemical imbalance. It's completely out of my hands. It's I've been predisposed to being like this, and so I had no choice in the matter. Now I understand it differently, and I think support is really important, and yeah, I'm lucky. I've got a wonderful family, and they are there for me, and they understand me. Although I'm not really being very good to myself at times, I don't really make time out to do some walking in the fields and being out in nature and stuff. I know those are the things that really help, and especially in this movement, we've also now seen the value of of peer support and being keeping company with people with similar experiences. There's a chap down my road who's also going through his own existential crisis, and also he's in the mental health system now. And you know, Fridays when he comes to the mosque and he sees I'm not there yet, it's just right next door. And then he'll come and fetch me. And in little ways that's actually helpful, because it makes you come out of your shell. It makes you deal with your challenges, because here's an individual who's not judgmental and who understands what it's like to feel those irrational urges and not functioning on logical basis always. If you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's really remarkable to be speaking with you from you're calling from Capetown, South Africa, and so many of the issues are very similar. But maybe you can tell us about, because I know that you're an organizer an activist there in Cape Town, also internationally. But maybe you can tell us about some of the things that are distinct to South Africa. I know that South Africa has an incredible political history with amazing struggle around apartheid and a lot of racial conflict and difficulty, as well as the economic crisis that's going on now in South Africa. Maybe you can just tell us about how all that fits together with the mental health issue and psychiatry and the work that you're doing.
Well, I mean, I think I have enough information to share that will make up maybe 2 hours of radio time. Um, um, but we have a long psychiatric history in this country, and especially Cape Town, where I live. There has been back in the 1860s or even earlier, the establishment of a lunatic asylum on the island, Robben Island. That's where Mandela was kept for 26 years. And that's a very forgotten history. I was lucky to come across some academic who wrote a thesis on this, so and she actually shared it with me. So luckily I've got some real good information there. At the moment we have a fairly good mental health system compared to the rest of Africa, because Africa is relatively poor and South Africa is relatively wealthy by comparison. Yeah. But be that as it may, it is a coercive system, and although they have the new Mental Health Care Act, where they have kind of euphemistically introduced a new category of hospitalizations called assisted hospitalization. I think it's just a kind of a whitewash for involuntary hospitalizations or forced treatment or forced hospitalization. And so they can like proudly announce that, well, the small proportion of people who are actually involuntarily hospitalized is actually very small. But I think that's just a major cover-up or whitewash of the real truth. And the real truth is that people don't really have much choices. But unfortunately, things are here still very much in the situation where people believe that the mental health system is benign, it has good intentions, and it's there to help people. And yet, when I was the consumer groups and working for the Mental Health Society as auxiliary social worker, I came across so many of the users or the consumers at the time talking about the negative experiences, how unhappy they were, and how bad the situation was for them when they were put in the seclusion rooms, for example, which they commonly refer to here as the kulukuts. Usually people are told that they are a danger to themselves and to others, and then they are placed in these rooms completely naked, and I've looked in those rooms, at least the old wards, they've just built a new wing, so the wards are nicer and more modern now, but the kulukuts at the time, that was used for all the time up till recently, it's a small dark room with a thick door. There's only a little viewing slot, like in a prison, I think, and a small window near the roof or near the ceiling, and so there's not much light either. So I can't kind of figure out the therapeutic value. One day I attended the therapeutic value of being secluded in such a terrible place. One day I visited the hospital with a group of people on the board of the hospital, because I also happened at some point to be the local hospital's a board member representing consumer interests, and I found all these people in their little lock section, and when we left here, they were saying, well, we want to come out, we want to come out. So I think, although people in South Africa believe that psychiatry has good intentions and the mental health system is there to help people, but I also believe that there is some validity to the claims, or there is some rationale to people's plea that they want to come out and that they want to be free and that they did nothing wrong. Why are they not allowed to come out? If you understand what I'm saying.
Absolutely, it's a very similar kind of situation in the United States. What are some of the other sort of political and economic forces? Because I know South Africa has a really incredible history, and there's so many similarities with the United States. But what are some of the things that make South Africa really different or
At
unique?
the time after the new government, that was after the oppressive apartheid system was overthrown democratically, and we had this new dispensation. The whole country went through a period where there were these big public hearings, and I think it's not precisely like your Senate hearings, but it was especially uh, um, called together commission by the government, and it was the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the TRC, and there we had this national reconciliation process where people spoke about in the past about the abuses, but I think I'm not very much aware of any of the TRC proceedings really having much to do with the abuses of the past in psychiatry. Be that as it may, we are now in a period where we have a new Mental Health Care Act, which I think the emphasis is on care, and I'm saying that care with forced hospitalizations doesn't really equal care, so they have to rethink it. And although this whole thing has this veneer of being so benevolent and so in the interest of the patients, they even have this monitoring group uh, um, which has been put into place by the government called the Mental Health Review Boards, and they kind of are supposed to monitor abuses and incidences of seclusion. You can't just seclude them anymore without it being reported, and even involuntary hospitalizations are now reported, and this commission then reviews every instance of this. But I've been in public discussions with some of the people from these from the Mental Health Review Board, and they have disappointed me when I asked them about these reviews that they do, because it seems that it's just become a bureaucratic exercise of keeping stats, and really it's not that meaningful. And although they claim that when they notice any abuse or whatever, they can really act harshly come down harshly on the perpetrators. Um, yeah, but I'm very skeptical. I don't really believe that it's going to work. So what I've been busy with is trying to establish a small little alternative project. In the meantime, I'm hamstrung because it's very difficult with no funding sources, and also finding it very hard to find people in similar circumstances to come onto my board. Um, when one has to start an NGO and have it registered with the government officially, your average mental health consumer or survivor or ex-user is very hesitant to make waves in society, and especially if they have to be officially having their personal details given for being on a board, and the government is going to know about it, and they fear that there's going to be some kind of victimization, I suspect, and that they're going to suffer at the end of the day. So it's been really a struggle trying to start something, but I've made some progress um, since trying first actually thinking about starting an independent NGO. And I must say to you guys, um, your center, the Freedom Center, has been very much of an inspiration to me.
Oh, thank you. Thanks a lot for saying that. Yeah, yeah. Well, it sounds like there's a lot of similarities in the struggles that we're all fighting, and I'm also very inspired by you have really kind of just on your own on your own motivation and your own vision have just kind of forged ahead and become a leading force in the South African movement without any funding or without any kind of official job or position on it. It's all just your own initiative.
Yeah, and the truth is, I actually resigned my post as an auxiliary social worker from the Mental Health Society, where I was in a permanent part-time position, which was brilliant for me. But I had to because there was no way I could kind of strike out on my own and having to be monitored and having to be under the auspices and the authority of some professionals. Um, and last year was very interesting for me because it was the big year of my conferences. I think I must have attended 6 conferences last year. And one very important one was where the mental health system in the country invited me last year in September to present a paper um, at their national conference. They called it the Mental Health in Durban in Johannesburg. So strangely enough, it's gone now full circle from the time where I was regarded as a maverick and just basically some kind of a dissident person to now actually being invited and funded to attend these conferences and then to share with people in this country this alternative vision and this basically self-help or do-it-yourself approaches to better mental health, and also the mutual support, peer support approach. Um, Interestingly enough, I also had another conference at a disability organization last year, which was hosted by a big university, a local university. And the topic of my poster, which I presented, was called 30 years of mutual support and 30 plus years of mutual support and self-help, the psychiatric user survivor movement. and I tried to kind of capture in that quick poster like the story from everywhere in the world, and also tying into it my basic challenge that I'm trying to establish here, this local project based on partially the Freedom Center, I should say, and we are going to call it the Ubuntu Center, which is also a uniquely South African concept. Ubuntu is a concept that also arose in this new era in which we are, and it's something which comes from traditional times here in South Africa, which is a traditional concept in the Black African communities of this humanity amongst people, and I like to think of it as a sense of solidarity or camaraderie or connectedness that people have with each other, and that also ties in very much with my understanding of support and people having time for one another, really. And if this is what I can capture in this project, then I'll be achieving a lot.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's really touching for me to hear that you're trying to get a mutual aid group started that's in some ways inspired by the Freedom Center. That's really touching.
One of my colleagues I don't have many because we are such a small group at the moment. Actually captured a sound bite which sort of explains what our center is going to be. He said it's the Ubuntu Center for Alternative Therapies in Mental Health and psych rights advocacy. So it's a mouthful, but I think it explains exactly what we're trying to achieve. On the one hand, we want to make accessible to poorer people alternatives, and then also we want to use that as a base from which we can do our advocacy from. The big challenge is to do it also within the system, the bureaucracy in the country, and getting our organization registered so that you can officially approach funders. That I think is a big problem in places in modern times. you need to get recognition and approval, and I think you have similar situations everywhere. In this country, for example, you need to get what they call an NPO number, which is a non-profit organization number. In the past, we used to refer to it as welfare numbers. But I just received an email from the registration authorities, actually yesterday or the day before. They said to me they received my application on the 9th of November last year, and they finally are going to assign my application to an assessor, and it's going to take up to 8 weeks, and then hopefully after 8 weeks or before 8 weeks, I will have my MPO number, and then I can really start functioning.
That's great. Well, congratulations and good luck with that. That's exciting, and I definitely want to have you back on the show to talk about the development of organizing the Ubuntu Center
Yes, of
in
the
Cape
Ubuntu
Town.
Center.
Yeah, that's amazing. Listen, I'm just so fascinated with what's happening in South Africa, but I also know that you're involved globally as one of the co-chairs of the World Network of Users and Survivors of Psychiatry. Can you tell us about the WNUSP and what kind of work that you guys are doing internationally and how maybe that ties in with the things that are going on in South Africa?
So the WNUSP is in its statute, so its constitution, is trying to become the global voice of um, users and survivors of psychiatry, and the definition of a user and survivor is somebody who has had experience in the mental health system. I can't give you the complete definition. It just evades me at the moment. And as the global voice, it's also very important to promote the establishment of especially national user survivor organizations, because having national organizations strengthens our advocacy positions. Like a mini United Nations, I should say, where you would then have official national voices. That is kind of the ideal. But it's all going to be based on local and then regional, provincial, statewide.
Are there other organizations in Africa that are doing similar kinds of work? I know that people have mentioned Ghana, and you also said Uganda.
Yes. Then WNUSP has a regional or continental group in Europe called the European Network INATS and of user survivors. And then back in 2005, our group in Uganda, Mental Health Uganda, which is user controlled, they kind of gotten to get the funding and the support, and they hosted this conference in Kampala, and I attended actually I was asked to give the keynote address, and we started a Pan-African network of users survivors of psychiatry. So there's another hat that I'm wearing. I'm under the secretary of the Pan-African network of users survivors of psychiatry.
What kinds of projects are going on in other parts of Africa that you find are inspiring? Are there similar kind of grassroots initiatives?
Africa has a very unique model, and I think especially in Ghana with Mind Freedom Ghana, which is our affiliate organization in Ghana, and Mental Health Uganda, and there's also some groups in Tanzania and Rwanda and Zambia. These are independent groups, and really it might sound that I'm trying to emphasize this point, independent of outside control, but really controlled by the users themselves. The these groups are very much promoting self-help, but especially in the sense of income generation. So you had a village-based agricultural product, and they will grow their own crops. And for example, or maybe a sewing project or something. So on the surface, it appears to be very much like your every other self-help thing, which is happening all over the show. But I think the big difference is that these organizations are under the control of user majority committees or boards or whatever. So that is the model we follow. So although it's based on the Western tradition of self-help, the setting is different. It's definitely rural and village-based. Whereas my project, I think, is definitely more urban. Well, the project that I'm trying to start, I shouldn't say my project really, because it's not just about me. I should say at the end of the day.
I'm curious about, do you think that given the fact that traditional economics and traditional communities are so strong in rural Africa, is there a different approach, that the idea is maybe to not so much try and change the mental health system, but to really strengthen communities and strengthen the self-help that's going on the local level?
Yes.
Is that right?
I once had a bit of a discussion with somebody from an organization called Basic Needs. This is a charity that's helping to set up self-help projects in certain African states, and I was saying, well, what we don't need is Western-style mental health, and the issue is not really around medication or psychiatry or doctors, and I think this person kind of gave me a bit of a better understanding, because she explained to me that, some of the self-help groups in Uganda, for example, when they find the need for medication, guess what? There's no state infrastructure which can supply people with medications. So if people want to get medication, they have a kind of a club which they pool their funds and they get medications that way. So it's not necessarily depicted as an anti-psychiatry phenomenon, the Pan-African Network and the user movement, because Africa is unique, because it doesn't compare to Western standards, where there is a big tradition of psychiatry and stuff. Like, for example, Ghana just has one statewide psychiatric hospital. South Africa being quite different, I suppose, as almost like a semi-developed country compared to the Western states, perhaps being called developed, and most of Africa being underdeveloped.
Is there more that you want to tell us about the organizing that you're doing in South Africa, some of the things that maybe give you a lot of hope for the future?
Well, I have lots of hope, but you know what? I've been, in a sense, being very pragmatic and realistic. Initially, I was idealistic. I was thinking, well, we need to have national and official provincial organizations, user-controlled, survivor-controlled groups, because everybody is really dependent on professional-run groups and interventions. And I've stepped away from that, I've realized that is maybe a bit of a distant goal, because it's unrealistic in terms of our present realities. What was achieved, for example, in Ghana, 20 people in the capital, 20 survivors came together and they started Mind Freedom Ghana. Bang, you have a national organization. That is not possible to do in South Africa, because we have a very big mental health establishment. But myself, I've then started organizing on a personal one-to-one level. So I've been focusing more on quality rather than quantity. And the first project that we are going to do is going to really put us on the map more than what we have ever been on the map before, if I can put it that way. Yeah. Would you like me to say maybe more about our World Network and just more general stuff about the survivor movement as a phenomenon is known worldwide?
Yeah, because I know that you're co-chair of the World Network of Users and Survivors.
Yes.
So
well,
what
in
are some
2001, the World Network was officially established when this group of survivors and users representing user survivor groups globally, they met in Vancouver, which was incidentally a sort of a shadow conference to the World Federation for Mental Health conference, which was also taking place in Vancouver at the time. And it happened when they officially adopted the statutes of the Constitution, and it officially became a. Then it was hosted by a Danish organization called LAP for short, and the LAP organization put a lot of effort into setting and getting together the second global assembly, which took place in 2004. This was where I came in because that was the one where I was invited to attend, and I was also then subsequently elected onto the board. So at the moment we are busy elected onto the board of the World Network.
And what are some other countries and areas of the world where people are getting organized and getting involved with the World
Well,
Network?
there is a great tradition in Europe, I think. Apart from the U.S., which has a long tradition, and we have quite a few of our members coming from there. But Europe and Britain and Germany, Netherlands, for example, Sweden, all those countries have it quite well established. But I must just point this out, that most of our user survivor groups are really poor and under-provided with very poor infrastructure. There's really no money, but varying successes depending on different countries or from place to place. Then we have the new rising African movement, as I was speaking about. We also have a strong tradition, for example, in New Zealand. We have a significant group in India, which I told you about before. And then we have the start of organizing starting in Latin America. Where am I missing? There's one area which we haven't really made inroads much into as yet is North Africa and the Middle East, but hopefully that will be remedied soon.
And you have a conference coming up in Uganda. And
yes, we are hoping to have our third global assembly of all our organizations coming together for the WNUSP conference, and this hopefully will take place in Kampala in October this year. And I must say that if it's okay, I would love to use this opportunity to use your airwaves and maybe hopefully some benevolent and maybe helpful and maybe people with some spare change lying around would be prepared to assist us, because we kind of in a difficult situation trying to raise funds for this conference. But it's very important for the new board to be elected and to give this new board a mandate from a global organization. So if people are interested, they can access the website of the World Network of Users and Survivors Psychiatry. It's www.wnusp.net. And you can look on the web page and you'll find most of the board members have their email addresses. One of the links on the front page, the main page. So my suggestion is, if you want to support us, you want to give a donation, you want to join, whatever, just visit our website and contact the closest person on our board, because we have people from all over the world. We've got somebody in Japan, somebody in New Zealand, somebody from Germany, Sweden, Britain, God, everywhere, also in Africa, 3 or 4 countries.
it's fantastic. So you also, Moosa, you also have a blog where you write. You want to give us the address of that? All this information also will be on the Madness Radio web page, and we can also help people get in touch. But tell us about your blog.
I am at the moment doing my own blog, so most of my significant events will be on the blog. It's http colon / Moosa, which is spelled Moosa -Salie SALIE .oism.info. And just an interesting story aside, OISM is a website which is hosted by an Italian survivor called Tristano Aimone. He lives in Turin in Italy, and I had met him in Milan in 2005 at a global consumer conference, which was hosted by WAPR, which is the World Association of Psychosocial Rehabilitation. And Tristano and I have become great friends, and you can read all about his story because his website is in English and in Italian. It's www.oism.info. So check out his website. He's been kind enough to host my website on his domain, and we've got to thank the people of Turin because they had a big fundraiser in December to pay for all the websites and the costs of hosting the website. So thanks to our Italian friends, and Tristano, you're a star.
Moosa, we are just about out of time. I just wanted to ask you if you had any last minute thoughts or inspirations that you wanted to leave our listeners with, maybe especially listeners who are maybe new to these issues, who are maybe going through some struggles themselves, or who have friends and family members and don't really understand a lot about the movement, but just want to maybe hear a little bit of your words of inspiration to them.
Actually, I have a good message there. I think that when you become you kind of become exposed, or you I can't find the words now, but you make contact with the mental health system in your life. Just do not become of the mindset that now that I have a psychiatric label, everything is over. I am hopeless. Now I'm a basket case. I'm lost cause. That's not the truth. As long as you have your heart beating and the blood flowing, believe in yourselves and make it possible. Everything is possible, and we have to believe that there is more positives in our lives than to focus on the morbidities and the comorbidities and the impairments and the negativities which the mental health system is indoctrinating us with. And I believe people need to believe and to have hope. And this is what I told some consumers in Italy. I said to them that, you know what, once you have taken charge of your life, believe me, you will have to reach a stage of your life where you tell the welfare system, thanks very much for you guys. You've supported me in my time when I was unable to cope. But you should believe that it's going to be possible, that this is not lifelong, that you can in fact move to that system, that you can in fact pick up the pieces of your life and then, start a proper job, earn a proper income, and you don't have to be dependent on welfare for the rest of your life. That's my message. My message is hope, believing in the possibilities. Yeah.
Moosa Salie, thank you so much for joining us on Madness Radio.
Thanks very much. It was a pleasure.
You've been listening to an interview with Moosa Salie. Moosa is the co-chair of the World Network of Users and Survivors of Psychiatry. He was calling us from Capetown, South Africa, and he is involved in organizing the Ubuntu Society. That's a mutual aid user survivor group that's getting off the ground in South Africa. Thanks a lot for tuning in. We will see you next week on Madness Radio. You've been listening to Madness Radio, voices and visions from outside mental health. Madness Radio is broadcast every Wednesday, 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Pacifica affiliate WXOJ-LP-FM 103.3 Valley Free Radio in Northampton, Massachusetts. For our live internet stream, podcasting, show archives, and more, visit madnessradio.net. Madness Radio is co-produced by Freedom Center and the Icarus Project. For more information, check out freedom-center.org and theicarusproject.net. For more mental health radio, listen to the News Hour from mindfreedom.org, Wednesdays, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you have an idea for a story or guest on Madness Radio, or you just want to share what's in your head, contact us at radio@madnessradio.net.
KWMD Kasilov, 90.7, Anchorage 104.5.